Before we entered Jasper National Park, we spent a few days in Hinton sorting out Daphne and replacing her brakes, and then we were ready to hit the Icefields Parkway. We'd driven this route before, but in autumn 2010, so it was a completely different sight with sunshine every day and no snow. The weather was amazing on our visit, and we had lots of stormy skies, so we had the best sunsets and really intense rainbows. This area was on a hike called the Valley of the Five Lakes, and there were some amazing coloured lakes with turquoise edges. We saw lots of wildlife while hiking and driving along the roads, including fighting marmots. We saw bighorn sheep, huge herds of elk, mountain goats, foxes, coyotes, and a couple of black bears. Because it was so busy during summer, we woke up really early every morning to start a hike and to get a space in the car park. And then once we were done, we'd have lunch and relax for a few hours, and then we'd do another hike in the afternoon. A lot of the lakes alongside the roads were really popular with people, but we ended up crossing the road and we found an amazing lake all to ourselves with a huge sandy bank which we could run down. After a few days exploring Jasper, we arrived in Banff National Park. As it was peak season and a national park, there was no way we could wild camp or sneakily stay anywhere, so we had to spend our time in campgrounds. So we either arrived really early to get a spot, or late in the afternoon once the campground was full, so we could actually stay in the overflow, which was much cheaper. Peyto Lake is one of the most beautiful lakes along the Icefields Parkway, but it's completely full of tourists, so we veered off onto a dirt track and headed into an area full of wildflowers and arrived at the most amazing view without anyone else there. The next day we headed to Lake Moraine, which we hadn't seen before because the last visit the road was closed due to the snow, so it was quite a treat going there, and we headed up the Eiffel Lake Trail. When we got to Lake Louise, we opted for the Lake Agnes hike with a detour to the Big Beehive, and from the top we got the most incredible view looking down on the blue lake, and we celebrated our 8-year travel anniversary there. After the hike, we headed to Yoho National Park, where we set off on the long but rewarding Iceline Trail. The hike took us through some of the best scenery in the Rocky Mountains. We passed lots of lakes, mountain views and glaciers, and we only saw a couple people all day. When we got back down the mountain, we checked out the huge waterfall near the car park, which drops 300 metres down, and then we set off on the zigzag road, which we only found out afterwards you're supposed to drive down one way and reverse down the next to avoid the tight bends. was then time for us to go back to Banff, and we saw some waterfalls and gorges before leaving all the crowds behind and heading to K Country. We were really excited to head back to K Country after our visit there in 2010. It was one of our favourite spots in the Rockies, and hardly any visitors go there. On our way there though, we stopped at a Canadian Tire and found a blow-up rowboat for $34, so we purchased that and named her Roland. Sadly, on our first paddle, a ranger nearly fined us for not having a life jacket, a bucket or a whistle on us. So we had to head back to town and buy the necessary goods, and then we were back on the road. A lot of the hikes were actually closed in K Country due to so many bears eating berries along the trails. So having the rowboat was actually a great way to be able to still see the park, but from a safe place. On the one hike we did do, we made loads of noise along the whole way, but as we went round a corner we bumped into a black bear. So we quickly got the bear spray at the ready and started backing away, and thankfully he did the same thing and we both went our separate ways. After trying out a few different lakes in Roland, it was time for us to leave the Rocky Mountains and head to the prairies.